Welcome everybody to episode 16 of the Content Lab podcast. We're joined by Torin Simpson. Torin's a 10-time Emmy Award winner, editor, producer, director, and shooter. Torin currently owns BeardGod Media House, a production house experienced in content development, creation, and delivery of digital content. Some of Torin's previous and current clients are CrossFit Inc., Golden State Warriors, San Francisco Giants, Oakland Raiders, and many more. Torin, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
How's it going being having a kid not that long ago?
Yeah, she
Congratulations,
just turned,
by the way.
thank you. Yeah, she just turned 4 weeks old on Monday. She's sleeping well. She's healthy. Mom's good. So yeah, we can't complain.
That's great. I remember when I first reached out to you, we started talking about the podcast. I'm like, hey, when can you do it? You're like, well, give me a couple of weeks, probably like a month, because I'm gonna have a kid probably in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
yeah.
that's great.
I was thinking maybe we could squeeze it in beforehand, but that you never know how things are going to go leading up to it. So
Absolutely. No, but I'm super glad that you're able to do it right now, and I appreciate it. I know a lot of my friends or the people that watch the podcast were asking me to do an episode with you. I posted like an Instagram story. Hey, who are some of the content creators that you want me to have on the pod, and your name popped up a couple times.
Oh,
So
that's
definitely,
awesome.
yeah. So Torin, let's talk about you. Let's talk about you growing up. Tell me where you're from, and how's your life growing up?
Yeah, growing up. So I'm from California originally, born in San Diego, lived there till I was 9 or 10. Then we moved up to a small town on the central coast of California called Lompoc. Lived there till I graduated high school. And then I went up to the San Francisco Bay Area to go to college, and stayed up there for 15 years or so. I don't know specifically growing up what you want to talk about, but
Well, you should. I don't know. Like, did you play any sports growing up, or was always like
yeah.
filmmaking your passion?
No, filmmaking was not my passion. I got very late into it. Movies were a passion for me, but sports-wise, I played baseball mostly as a kid. Wasn't very good. I had weight issues a lot over my childhood. In the 7th grade, I weighed 300 pounds, if you can believe that. And granted, I was a little taller than most kids, but I was still very overweight. Decided to give basketball a try. And so that was 8th grade year. And I got on a team, and this coach probably saved my life, but he had me come like an hour before practice and stay an hour after practice and just worked with me. And by the time I went into high school, I was down to 215 pounds. And so from there, I played football. I eventually switched from basketball to wrestling, and then I did track, shot put and discus, and then eventually went and played football in a small school up in the Bay Area for college.
Nice. How tall are you? I've seen you in person, but I don't remember exactly.
6'5".
Yeah, tall dude. You and Richard Bloomer, Michael, all of you guys are pretty tall.
Yeah.
Is that a requirement to be a filmmaker? Just gotta be 6'4" or taller.
I don't think so. It's not much of an advantage. If you're ever shooting with a camera on your shoulder, it's very awkward because you tend to shoot down at someone. And it's just not a very appealing looking shot. So
that even happens to me. I'm like 6'1" or 6 feet tall kind of. And I feel like most people that I'm shooting, I feel like I'm in a little angle. So I always have to feel comfortable at the angle I'm shooting. I go just a little lower, especially with photos. It's like kind of like, I always say, like, if I was like 5'10", 5'9", it would be like perfect, like angle to shoot. Well, you mentioned that filmmaking was something that you were not into. You were into movies, you said, but not filmmaking. How do you find that, like, or how did it get started of you like grabbing a camera and being like, okay, I like this. I like what I'm doing here.
Yeah. So essentially what happened is I went to college, had really no idea what I was going to do after college. Thought maybe I would go the teacher coach route like a lot of people do. Did not enjoy the teaching aspect of it. And I was talking to my mom one day, and she said, well, what do you love? And I said, I love movies. And she said, well, why don't you go to school and learn how to make movies. And I was like, that's a great idea. And so I went to the Academy of Art in San Francisco. They had a 3-year master's degree program. And that's essentially, I had shot a little bit in college. Like, I was a communications major. So there were some classes where it's like, oh, here's a camera, but it never clicked for me that like this was a thing that I could do. I just, did the assignments and moved on. Went to the Academy of Art, started getting introduced to shooting, editing. We would edit tape to tape. We would shoot on film, edit film, edit on Avid. And I was there about a year, and I had a teacher say, if this is what you want to do, just go do it. You don't need to go to school. And I was like, man, okay. And so what got me going in this industry was I had known a guy named Chris Gargano who had co-taught a sports journalism class at my undergraduate. I loved that class, but it was more of a writing, like journalist writing class. But he had become the executive producer of the Oakland Raiders broadcasting department. And so I emailed him and said, hey, I don't know if you have any internships available, but I would love an opportunity if you have one. And he said, come on in and we'll talk. And he gave me an internship. And that was essentially how I got started doing this.
That's awesome. And we're talking, you were about, 23 to 25 years old?
Yeah. So that was 2005. I graduated undergrad 2001. So yeah, I think I was about 25 years old.
That's super interesting. So growing up, like in high school, do you ever like grab a camera and take some pictures? Like kind of like, was it something that ever interested you or had it like in the back of your mind? Or it was kind of like, no, that's awesome. I mean, I think that's great because there's a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends that, are in that 25 to 26 or 25 to 30-year-old age that they're just getting started with photography and just kind of like content creation. And sometimes I think like, oh, it's too late, for me to like get good at it. And give me a second. My dog is kind of messing up.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
Just 1 second. All right. My bad. I need to just open the door. So most of my friends, 25 to 30 years old, that they are just getting started. They just think it's too late. And I always tell them, like, I have a friend. His name is Frank. He probably got started when he was like 35. And he's doing great things. And it just kind of like, I don't know. I like when people on the podcast, like you, for example, you never had that passion for it. And you tell me that you got started after college, after playing sports. It just kind of like, it's going to give some people like hope, like, okay, I can, one day do stuff like Torin's doing. And we'll talk more about like the things you've done. I mentioned that you were a 10-time Emmy Award winner, but I want to talk about that process to get there. You start as an intern. How did things develop to actually, getting a more of a full-time job and be more of a senior producer in the industry?
Well, the lucky thing about this internship was it wasn't the type of internship where you just get coffee. It was very much what do you want to do? And we're just going to throw you into the fire. So I did have to do a lot of the grunt work, like logging interviews. And we would literally do it, with the pencil and paper and write the time code and then write it down. And then, this was 2005. And then we would take that and then transcribe it on a computer. And so doing grunt work like that, we would get, tapes from NFL Films every week. And then we'd have to go through and log that stuff, everything was all on tape back then, and then they'd be like, hey, do you want to go shoot this, behind the scenes of a commercial being made for, the Raiders apparel? And I'd be like, all right, and they'd like, here's the camera, here's a microphone, good luck. And send me by myself and then come back. And it was like completely unusable. But essentially I learned by just doing it, which is the only really most effective way in this industry is to learn by doing it. Like you can go to school, but even coming out of school, there's a strong chance you won't be at a high enough level. You know what I mean? Like it really is it's one of those industries where you learn as you go. I think it's kind of old school in that sense. And then, so I was there for a couple years and I had to work. So essentially what I would do is I didn't get paid. I would work all day there. And then I would go to a second job from like 6 to midnight or something, where I worked with a young man who had spinal muscular dystrophy. And I did that for a long time until eventually they paid me enough to where I didn't have to do that. And I was there for a couple of years, and then I applied for a job with the Golden State Warriors. And that was my first like full-time salaried position with a sports team. But yeah, I mean, I would say I paid my dues with the Raiders, but at the same time, like the experience I got was like editing, shooting, writing, producing. They didn't have a motion graphics person. So I was like, hey, I'll figure, we were on Final Cut Pro at the time. So I was like, hey, I'll learn Apple Motion. And so I would get in Apple Motion and start doing stuff and figuring that out. And then when I went to the Warriors, it was heavy motion graphics. And so it was like, all right, I'll learn After Effects. And so I would create like a lot of, if you ever go to a basketball game and you see like the 360 LED ribbons and like you see all the animation and all that stuff, like I would learn how to do that. So it went on from there. I don't know if we want to keep going through the whole career or.
Well, yeah, we'll keep talking throughout it. But you mentioned that this is one of the industries that you kind of like learn as you go, as you do it more. And I think that's like one of the cool things about it too. Like the more you practice it, the better you're gonna get. It's not something that somebody's gonna teach you right away. You're gonna like, get it. And it's something that you, I always say like, at the beginning I was doing like the whole fake until you make it kind of thing. Like, hey, can you do this type of videos? And I'll be like, oh yeah. And then I'm like, okay, I have 2 weeks to learn how to, do that kind of stuff. And the only way to get there is just practicing and shooting, going out shooting. And a lot of the guests have mentioned this, but it's like being like really hard on yourself too, like knowing where you're at. Like, okay, I'm not where I want to be, but the whole like, going out shooting, asking for friends to like help you with like, can you model for me and take some photos, and then going back and just being hard on yourself and learning from those mistakes that you make. And that's also like why I think I'm so passionate about this, because it's a whole learning process that you never stop learning, right? So it's like you can always get better. I mean, you've been in the industry for 17 years, and I'm sure you sometimes think like I can still get a lot better and do a lot of cooler things. Like you're never gonna be happy to where you're at. So it's like you're never gonna peak.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've never been content or satisfied or even necessarily like happy. And I feel like if you ever get to that point in this industry, it's probably time to move on to something else. But it's just, I would say if I work on something in the moment when it's done, there's a moment of like, hey, this is pretty good. I'm happy with this. And if you give it a little bit of time, as you evolve artistically, creatively, you'll look back on something that could be years ago, could be a month ago, and you'll be like, I wish I would have done this differently. I wish I would have done that differently. I wish I would have shot that differently. So yeah, it's you're chasing the satisfaction, but hopefully you never reach it,
Yeah, and it's also an industry that it just keeps changing because of technology, and at the end of the day, like we have to adapt to new technology and to newer trends. I mean, especially in like the content creation, when you talk about like creating digital assets for like companies on social media, like you just have to adapt to whatever it's relevant at the time, even though it's things that you're not really like interested in doing. I know you're making movies and stuff, but I'm talking more for like stuff that I do, that I work with clients, like social media stuff. Like I have to constantly be adapting to like newer trends. And I mean, sometimes I can look back and be like, oh my God, like that's annoying that trends keep changing. But at the same time, it's like, it gives it like something special, like interesting that you're learning new things all the time.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about you getting into the CrossFit world. Like obviously, that's kind of like what people know me more for, like the CrossFit industry. And so let's talk more about like, how do you get involved into CrossFit? Do you do CrossFit as a sport before you got involved into filming stuff, or it was kind of like the opposite, like you were filming and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna try this sport?
Yeah. So 2011, I was working for the San Francisco Giants, and I had mentioned earlier my struggles with my weight. And so when I got into college playing football, I was an offensive lineman. So my weight went up as it was supposed to. And then once I got out, I dropped a bunch of weight. And then slowly over the period of 10 years, put weight back on. And so 2011, I was up to 306 pounds. And my son was a year old, and I decided, I was like, I have to make a change. And so I'd seen the CrossFit Games on TV, but I was very scared about actually trying it because I didn't feel fit enough. You know, like I think a lot of people will say, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, so I can't do CrossFit. So I spent a year trying to figure out, should I try it? Should I not? And eventually I just walked into a box, CrossFit at Fremont, and gave it a try. Started doing it, loved it. At the time I was working for the San Francisco Giants, and I would not shut up about CrossFit like most people who first start doing CrossFit. And so everyone that I worked with knew that I did it. And one day someone said, hey, the head of CrossFit Media is coming through for a tour of the ballpark. You should say hi. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was Tony Budding at the time, was around since the beginning, essentially. And so we met and talked and shook hands and exchanged information. And I followed up with an email, and I was definitely fishing, you know. And maybe six months later, I got a call from Rory McKernan, and he said, hey, we have some local regional athletes that we need features done on. Are you interested in doing anything for us? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I knew it was kind of a tryout. And so, I was like, I got to knock this out of the park. And I went and shot a piece, and it turned out really well. And they ended up bringing me on full time. So that was 2013.
Was that like a no-brainer for you whenever you got like the offer to be full-time for CrossFit? Because you were also doing pretty big things.
It was a no-brainer because here's the thing about working for professional sports teams: doesn't pay very well. Unless you're like a high-level executive, the amount of hours that you work versus what you're getting paid, there's no overtime. There's no 8-hour days. Like, especially in baseball, there's 160 games regular season, not even including playoffs. And the Giants at the time were playing a lot of playoff games. It's a grind. It's really a grind. And I think they kind of rely on people who are avid fans of the team or just want to be in that environment. And while I did enjoy being in that environment, I wasn't I'm not a diehard sports fan. I don't watch any live sports. I follow everything, but I don't actually sit down on Sunday and watch, every single football game. So yeah, the other thing was that CrossFit, at least for me, always has paid fair. You know what I mean? And so it was a considerable increase in income for me. And then at the same time, it was like 20. Yeah, I just was like, oh man, I was doing CrossFit and now I'm working for CrossFit. So I was like, this is going to be awesome.
You said that was 2011?
2013.
2013.
I started doing CrossFit in 2011, and in 2013, I just started working for them.
From 2013, I feel like 2013, 2015 is when things just started taking off.
Yeah, it was
a lot in CrossFit, and especially because of media. Like the media content just got a lot. You can tell the production value was getting better. I started in 2016 CrossFit, but I was watching it before then. I was watching the Rich Fronting, what's Rich doing videos. I will watch the CrossFit game stuff like that, but it was something that always interested me, but I never did it. But the moment I started doing it in 2016, I got so obsessed with it that I went back and I was watching all the YouTube videos, all the movies. I remember watching the Fronting movie, the one that was from 2015. And that what got me hooked into CrossFit was pretty much the videos that there were out there about CrossFit, like the movies, all the documentaries, the behind the scenes that Sivan was doing, all that kind of stuff is what actually got me like hooked into the sport. It wasn't like some of my friends did it, but that wasn't like what got me inside a box. So I know for a fact that that's how a lot of people got started too. Just watching the movie for the first time and being like, okay, that's dope. I'm gonna do it. And you talked about fishing for that opportunity, right? Like you met the guy and it's not like you guys met and you were like, yeah, it was nice meeting, keep me in mind. That's it. You probably did tell him that, like, hey, keep me in mind, whatever, but you followed up with an email and you kind of like chase the opportunity. And I think that's something that it's just important. Like opportunities are just not going to come like right away. Right. And you have been around for so many years. Like what kind of like suggestion would you tell somebody that's like, hey, I'm not really good at like fishing for opportunities, like chasing people. Yeah. Is there any tips, recommendations?
Yeah. Like it's funny. I always tell people, for this industry, it's all about who you know. Because people tend to hire people that either come highly recommended to them from someone that they know or that they've worked with, that they're like, okay, I love this person. I want to continue working with this person. It's very tough to get into a role or a job where you've never worked with that brand or that person or that company. Even if your content is phenomenal, because there's so many people who you can look at their reel and be like, man, this is great. Like it's a very, very crowded market. And I've done a ton of cold contacting and like, you'll get nothing back. You know what I mean? So I guess you kind of have to look at it like, I don't know, like dating, right? It's like, if you see a girl and you don't talk to her, you don't approach her, you don't even try, nothing's going to happen. You go over there, she says no, yeah, at least you tried. You know what I mean? And she might say yeah. But if you don't try, you leave it up to fate, probably nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean?
True.
So really it's just keep trying. You got to hustle. You got to talk to people. You got to network, communicate. Social media is great for that. And then just like one of my things is like, if you do make it, someone gives you a shot and it turns into something, like remember that and pay it forward. So that's one of the things I've done is like, anytime someone reaches out to me or if someone's hungry and they're like, hey, are there any opportunities? I do my best to help them out. And someone gave me a shot. So it's like, I want to, and I've given people opportunities and they've wasted them. But then there's people who haven't, so
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. And talking about back to like where you started CrossFit and I was mentioning that the media, like the content creation was growing a lot. What were you exactly doing in CrossFit when you were full time, and how long were you full time for at the industry?
I was full time there for about 2 years, I think, before I took a job with the Golden State Warriors for that. The first year they won in 2014-15. And then with CrossFit, I was mostly on the game side. So we would travel around to different athletes and shoot like documentary day in the life type stuff, mostly for features that would run on YouTube, but then features that would also run for the game's broadcasts. Yeah. I would also work on the CrossFit games back then. What they would do is they would rework every single show of the games in post. And so we would, because at the time, even like on the live TV truck side, sometimes because the sport was still new and some of those people weren't acclimated to the sport, they weren't always cutting to the right shot or what the story was, if that makes sense, in the event. So we would have to go back and rework at times. Like events sometimes change the like the live calls, and then we would basically rework every single episode, dropping graphics, dropping packages, and then give them to ESPN. So I did.
I forgot that ESPN was involved in those years.
I think one time, me and Charlie Doobie, who was a producer for CrossFit at the time, we spent like 36 straight days at HQ working on these shows. It was wild. And then what else did I do? So, and then like, every once in a while, they'd be like, hey, we want you to go do a piece on James Hobart, who's competing at regionals. And I'm like, all right, and then so like I went and basically slept on his couch for a week and followed him around and told his story. We did a cool feature on Wyclef John doing CrossFit at one point, little things like that. Basically, whatever they told me to do, they'd be like, I had some really cool experiences. They're like, hey, you want to go to Berlin for the invitational? It's like, yeah. Do you want to go to New Zealand for 2 weeks and like document the box tour? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I basically, a lot of game stuff, and then just, whatever else they need me to work on.
Yeah. And you were talking about networking and how important it is for, to find opportunities. I feel like the CrossFit content creation industry is also very good at that. You can tell me more about experience because you've also been in like football, and also basketball, right? But I feel like the CrossFit industry, like people are very friendly and they're not scared of like if for example like I'm not available for a job, like that person is not scared to like give the opportunity to somebody else. And that's happened to me too. That's how I shot Granite Games with Tier. Richard Bloomer is usually one of their he's probably the one that makes like most of their content stuff when it comes to like commercial stuff. And they reach out to him like, hey Richard, like can you shoot Granite Games with us? And Richard is like, sorry, I can't, I'm gonna shoot with CrossFit, but I can recommend you somebody. And that's how I got the opportunity, right?
Yeah,
I feel like CrossFit's very good at that. I've getting opportunities too when it comes to stuff like that, but it just seems to be a very more like friendly community when it comes to the content creation part of it too. And what do you think about it? Just being also in all our sports.
Yeah, it's not very cutthroat. I think everyone's pretty supportive of each other. Everyone's kind of rooting for each other. I guess it's maybe it's just the CrossFit community in general. It's like, it's just a really awesome community. Like for me, it's a rewarding, like, having worked in other professional sports, I'm sure some people would say like, well, why would you work in CrossFit, which is kind of, a niche sport compared to like the NFL or NBA. But like for me, it's just much more enjoyable. And I think part of it is just, all the people and the friends on the content creation side. It's like everyone's just kind of rooting for each other, similar to like, like a CrossFit workout where everyone's rooting for each other, like someone who wins a game at the event, wins an event at the games, and then walks onto the floor to motivate someone who's struggling. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't see that type of stuff anywhere else. So I think it, within the content creation side that exists, but in the community as a whole, it exists. You know what I mean? And so I think it kind of filters into different parts.
I agree. I feel like that's one of the reasons why I find this industry so like enjoyable for me too, because I do a lot of different things. But I feel like the things I look for the most, the jobs I look for the most is when it's related to CrossFit. Even though it might be more work when it comes to like, like if I have to shoot and edit long nights and all that, but after I'm done with the week, it's so rewarding and so like
Yeah.
it feels so good, like to, you know, as you said, like network and like be with the community and like talk to different people with different backgrounds and just learning from each other. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Let's answer one question here that we have from Enrique. He
Sure.
says, Torin, what's something you wish you would have done different at the beginning of your career?
So in the beginning of my career, I wish I had learned how to take criticism better. I used to get really emotionally attached to anything I would work on. And then if anyone was like, oh, what about this or what about changing this? I felt it was a personal attack. And I would get really defensive. And so I wish early on, and I feel like I'm better about it now, but early on, I wish I hadn't taken things so personally. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like most people have been there too, right? Like you never like somebody to tell you, hey, you know, like you send up a final product out and they're like, yeah, you know, I like it, but I think you should change this and that. And you're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But as we were talking at the beginning, it's just kind of like a learning experience. You just got to be tough on yourself sometimes. And
Yeah.
and some of the things that I did a lot were posting my video or sending my video out to friends and receiving feedback, like people that have been in the industry for a lot longer. I remember when I first started, I had like 3 to 4 content creator friends that were, you know, very experienced. I will send all my stuff to them and they'll be like, I think you kind of, you know, like they wouldn't be afraid to tell me criticism because they knew like I will appreciate it. And I learned a lot from that. So
Yeah. The key to criticism is you got to like, if my advice to anyone who is going to criticize something, come with something positive first, then go negative.
The sandwich.
Go positive. Yes.
Yeah.
The shit sandwich.
Yeah.
I think that helps a lot instead of just being like, oh man, I would definitely change this or this doesn't work. You know, you build them up and cut them down.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk about the movie that's coming up. So the next gen movie, it's coming up July 5th, right? So, but people can pre-order now.
You can pre-order it.
Yeah, so you were heavily involved in the making of that movie. Can you tell me a little bit about what was your role?
Yeah. So Mariah Moore is the director. It's her vision. At the games, I was basically a camera operator. And we have a really big team of camera operators who shoot behind the scenes and action. And then we shoot. And then after the fact, it's like, okay, obviously you have to see how the games play out. But then it's like, okay, what are the stories that we like? Annie Thorsdottir, the things that she did and what she accomplished. Obviously, it's like, okay, we need to tell some of her story about, you know, coming back from pregnancy and stuff. So Mariah asked me to help a little bit on the editing. So she would send me a hard drive. And so when you watch the documentary, it's like, it's the recap of the games essentially. But then in between, you'll hear little stories from, you know, different people on based on who she decided to focus on. And so I helped edit like a little bit of that stuff.
Nice.
And then, you know, she'll hit me up for like, hey, what do you think of this or whatever? And, you know, different periods throughout, but it's her baby. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, it's like, it's just really cool to see her, from where she started and like how we first met and where she's at now. It's just, yeah, it's just really, it makes me proud, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And you were able to watch it, right? A couple of days ago.
Yeah, I watched it a couple of days, the final cut, and I thought it was awesome. There's some really great moments that were captured, some great stories of people who deserve to have their stories told. And then, you know, as the sport is, I would say, is in a transition period right now where there's a lot of the OG older athletes are starting to retire and phase out, and you have this young crop of athletes who are are coming into this sport and are starting to, make some noise. Justin Medeiros, obviously being the big one, Mal O'Brien, Emma Carey, and there's even more now. It's pretty wild. But that's kind of the concept for the next gen. It's like, the focus isn't on the next generation. When you watch it, it's like the concept is that there is a shift in of who's competing. You know what I mean? And it's this up and coming group of people who started when they were 10, 11, 12 years old. You know what I mean? So they're going against the people that they watched when they were that age,
And I was talking to a friend about it not that long ago. The name, I think it's perfect. Or some people didn't like it at first. Like, what do you mean next generation? Like, Tia's still winning, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But in reality, like what we're seeing right now, it's that generation that started CrossFit as like their main sport. It's not like in the past that, most CrossFit athletes, they used to have a weightlifting background. Yeah, I went to college. I did gymnastics in college, or I played football, baseball, whatever. Like the generation that's coming up, it's people that literally like their first sport and only sport since they were 9-10 years old has been CrossFit.
Yeah.
And these are probably the people are going to make a huge difference in the sport because they're just so well-rounded. So like that's what they've been trained their whole life. As you were mentioning, like Emma Carey and Mal and Emma Lawson, there's so many of those new athletes. So it's pretty, pretty interesting. I can't wait to watch the movie. All I've heard is good things about it so far of people that have watched it. And I mean, how does it feel?
If you're a fan of the sport, you're gonna enjoy it. You know what I mean? Sure. There's no way you won't.
Yeah, and how does it feel for somebody like you that you were so involved in the movie? Like, what's that like sense of like satisfaction after you finished and you're like, like I was a part of this and I'm proud of it? Or it's something kind of you don't like notice that much at the moment of watching the movie?
Well, there's moments where I'm proud in the way that the story's told, like the way it's put together. Since I'm not technically in charge of it and it's not my thing, there's a little bit of disconnect in the sense that where it's like I wasn't calling the shots. So I'm proud to have been a part of it, and I'm really proud of how it turned out. But at the same time, I'm already in like, I mean, we've moved on, and it's like, okay, what are we doing this year?
What's next?
How are we covering the games this year? And we have I also work on the Miles to Madison docuseries. And they, especially at the games, in terms of coverage, it's a joint effort. And so it's twofold is like, okay, how are we going to cover the games for the documentary? And then how are we going to cover the games for Miles to Madison? And make sure that they're not the same exact thing. So that's where I'm at right now is like, I've already moved on, you know what I mean? And so I'll help promote the documentary and stuff, but it's like, it's in the past already for me, even though it's not out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's awesome how the whole like cycle works. When Mariah was on the pod, I think she was episode 9, maybe 11. I think she was 11. I was talking to her. I'm like, so how do you feel after, she produced the 2018 movie that was released last year, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, how do you feel after it got released? And she was kind of like, she was like ready to get after her next one because it's just so like you literally finish a movie. Once the movie's released, you're already working on the next one. Mm-hmm. So she had kind of like her mind on this one, the next gen movie, which is gonna be the first one she produced and like directed from beginning to end.
Yeah.
So I know it means a lot to her, and we had a good conversation about it. And she talked about like her challenges, like getting started in the industry, and how like things just evolved to the point that where she's at right now. And she's such a huge influence for some of the content creators,
Yeah.
Let's bring it back a little bit to once you stopped working with CrossFit Games and you went to work with Golden State Warriors. Yeah. Do you still do like freelance stuff for CrossFit, or was fully involved into Golden State?
So I I would work the games. I think I worked the games even after I left every year, except for maybe, I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018 or something like that. So I would continue to like help at the games, but I didn't do much outside of that when I was working for the Warriors for them. And then I only worked for the Warriors for I think 18 months before I decided that I wanted to go into business for myself. And the funny thing is, the thing that allowed me to make that jump, because I didn't own any of my own equipment. The thing that allowed me to make that jump was I had lunch with Savan one day, and I told him what I was thinking about doing, and he said, I don't know, can you still hear me? Because your picture just went up. Oh, you're there. Yeah. Savan said, you can do as much or as little work for us as you want, like freelance. And I was like, shit, okay. And so that gave me the confidence to go spend like 20 grand on my credit card, knowing that I would have a client that would pay me, that I could pay it off essentially. Yeah. And so that's what I did. Yeah, I went into business for myself. And at that point, I wasn't doing games content. I was doing affiliate content. So I was working for Tyson Oldroyd, who's Mariah's husband. And he would contract me and he would say, hey, we have a story in like wherever, do you want to go do that? And I'm like, sure. Like, yeah. I'd be like, hey, there's a hockey player in LA who does CrossFit, professional hockey player. Like, do you want to go tell that story? It's like, yeah, sure. And so I would do those one-man band. I would do them all by myself. I would shoot them, produce them, edit them, voiceover, graphics, the whole nine.
You'll do the voiceovers too?
Yeah. Nice. Only because I basically what he would do is like, hey, here's the amount of money we can pay you for this project, and then all expenses would come out of that. And so it's like, well, yeah, I could pay someone else to do it, but then that's money out of my pocket. And so, yeah, I would just read it myself.
That's something I've had in mind of doing. And then I'm like, no, dude, like you have an accent and English, not even your first language. So that's like out of the picture for me. I have to hire out for that.
I think you can try it and see. Like when I first started hearing my voice, I was like, oh, this is so bad. And then people would be like, oh, I really like your voiceover. And I'm like, I was like, really? I'm like, okay. So I think sometimes that stuff's in your own head. You know what I mean?
Like, for example, I can watch the episodes back. Like, for example, this episode, I'll watch it back to find a couple of quotes like of you like saying some cool things, but I can't listen to myself. It's it's pretty bad. And you're saying that's when you started your own company, right? BeardGod Media. Mm-hmm. Cool. Was the beard always a thing? A beautiful beard?
The beard started in 2010. So I'd always had some form of facial hair. I did the goatee for a long time. I like handlebar mustache. Like I would change it up. And then 2010, I was working for the Giants, and I started growing a full beard. And then that was their first World Series championship. And during the playoffs for baseball, and sometimes hockey, I think, players will tend to grow like a playoff beard. And the whole team, there was quite a few beards on that team that were pretty epic. And then Brian Wilson who was a closer, grew this epic beard that he like dyed black. And right around that time, like beards in general just became insanely popular. And I never cut it off. And so, yeah, I've had a full beard since 2010. I'll take like a couple inches off every once in a while. Yeah. But
you can't go back anymore. Your company name, it's Beard Media, BeardGod. That's like people know you for it, BeardGod.
It's funny because my chin's right here, and when I see pictures of myself without a beard, I'm like, man, it looks weird to me. I like the way it looks with the beard. So yeah, I'll never cut it off. No.
Love it. Let's answer some questions that we have here.
All right.
So Christian Flores, he says, would you ever compromise your style of shooting per as a brand request? And if not, why? I get asked this frequently. Would love to hear your perspective.
Well, I think you kind of have to adhere to what a brand wants in terms of the video. So, like, I don't operate a gimbal. I don't really like gimbals. I feel like they're overused. And so, but if the brand was like, hey, we want everything shot on a gimbal, then I would be like, all right, I mean, that's what you want. Like that, if they're paying for it, in terms of style, like the way I think ultimately it comes down to a comfort thing, right? It's like, yeah, you're more comfortable doing things the way you want to do. If someone's asking you to do something outside of your comfort zone, then you either figure out how to get it done or you don't take the job. But one of the cool things about CrossFit or working for CrossFit is I've always had a ton of creative autonomy, and so I do things the way I want to do them, and I like shooting on sticks on a long lens. That's one of my favorite things to do. And then if I go handheld, like I like using an easy rig. And if I'm ever in a situation where I do need a gimbal, I'm gonna have to find someone else to do it because I don't have that experience, and it's not one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, I could do that for you. Like it would be all like, bad. It would be bad gimbal. So yeah, I think you do have to make compromises if you want to get paid,
Absolutely. I agree. We have Enrique. He asked, what's the biggest difference in working for an organization like the Warriors or MLB teams and CrossFit as an organization?
We have a lot more, there's a lot more roadblocks when you work for like the Warriors or baseball or football, but essentially getting access to the players, there's a lot more barriers, and you have to deal with PR, and like their time is very valuable. Where in CrossFit, and it's changing a little bit in CrossFit because people now we used to just reach out directly to the athletes and be like, hey, can we come shoot with you? Can we set something up? And now you got to go through agents and managers. And there's restrictions on what can be talked about. So I would say the biggest difference is access, for sure.
Awesome. And then Jordan asked, what is the main advice you'll give someone still new in the CrossFit? Well, not in the CrossFit, in the media space. So what's the main advice you'll give somebody that's new in the media space?
Stay hungry, and you'll be good. You'll be good. Like, I feel like if you're hungry and this is what you really want to do, like people will see that, and it'll lead to other things. I think there's some people where I see problems in the sports media space are there's people who want to create and there's people who want to be around the environment. If that makes sense? So there's people who want to work for sports teams because because it's cool. They want to be around the athletes. They want to be friends with the athletes. They want to talk to them. And I would say that's very much an issue in the CrossFit space as well. There's people who want to create, and social media has made things weird because people want content, not to create awesome content, but to build up a following for themselves, if that makes sense. Where it should really be, it's not that, you know what I mean? Like it's not genuine, where like you should want to do this because you want to tell stories or you want to make awesome content. That stuff will come, you know what I mean? But I think social media's kind of changed that dynamic a little bit. And I think people get it reversed where, it's like my son says, yeah, I want to be a YouTuber. You probably hear a lot of kids say, I want to be a YouTuber. And it's like, well, why do you want to be a YouTuber? Do you want to do it because you want to make cool content? Or do you want to do it because you want a million likes on a video? And that's what it is. When I listen to him talk about it, he's like, oh, so-and-so has, 20 million likes on their video. That's crazy, and it's like, yeah, but that shouldn't be the motivating factor. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I also feel like, people are really passionate about it, uh, like the likes and the followers, that's something that they don't really care, right? Like if you're proud of something you made and you post on your social media and you're like, okay, cool, what, you got 100 likes, like I don't care. But that's gonna give that person a lot more of a, like a, I don't even know how to explain it, like that they're gonna feel a lot more proud of their work, or like instead of like being just happy because they got like, I don't know, 5,000 followers in a month. I don't know if you know what I mean. It's kind of like in my head it makes sense. It just like that satisfaction, it's a lot more when it's something you're passionate about. But yeah, as you said, it's true. Like social media has changed things so much. People post stuff without worrying that much about the quality, but they know it's gonna get likes and followers.
Yeah, if it has certain people in it, right? Like
and being completely honest, like sometimes I'm like posting a lot and I'm like, oh, it's getting good traction, and then I look back and I'm like, what are you doing? Are you just posting like photos because like you're getting good engagement, or because you like the stuff that you're putting out and you want to show people your art? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of like the way I see social media, just showing people like the stuff that I do. And that's kind of something that I've had to like work on and be like, don't post to make other people happy, post to make yourself like happy and proud of the things that you do and the things you want to show everybody. And that's one of the reasons why I haven't been posting as much as before. It's because I just want to post things that I'm super proud of and that I want people to see. But it's, as you said, it's so much like instant gratification about like getting a lot of likes and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's not important. And that's I have a friend that always tells me that. He always tells me likes and followers don't equal money. And it's
I mean unless you're trying to, I mean, like, what do you do you want to like get free supplements or like push a product on social, you know what I mean? It's like, I get it for like people who like athletes who like are making money doing that stuff, but like, I think it's dangerous for content creators because you might put something up that you're really proud of or that is incredible, and it might not, the algorithm might bury it. And now you're going to look at it and be like, well, this isn't good.
Exactly. Yep.
And it shouldn't be it shouldn't validate you as a creator. And it's a really, really hard thing, I think, for people to do. And I do it too. Like I'll post a picture. I'm like, man, this picture's awesome. I get like 40 likes, I'm like, what? And then like I post a portrait of Danielle Brandon, and it's it's fine. There's nothing that special about it, but because it's her, it gets like 600 likes, and I'm like, well, I'm like, cool. It's a nice photo, but it's not that special. You know what I mean? So, even I can get caught up in that. It's like, oh, maybe this isn't as good as I thought it was.
It happens so often. One of my best friends in the industry, his name is Bennett. He's in the Mayhem Media team. He showed me a video. It was freaking awesome. Like I loved it. It was super like, kind of like a hype video, but it had some story behind type of thing. Like you can hear the voiceover. So I saw it and I loved it. I'm like, dude, it's freaking great. Like post it. Like a day after, he messaged me back like, dude, it's getting no engagement. Like people are not liking it. And I get what he's saying, because I've been, as you said, like we've all been there, but at the end of the day, it's not important. Like he was proud about the job that he did. And I told him like, dude, that's all it matters. Like we have to stop getting caught up into, oh yeah, he has more followers and more likes.
Yep.
And it also helps to see people that are like very well established in the industry, and that they're doing very good, and they don't have that many followers, and that's when you're like, dude, it's not important.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the awards you've won. You have 10 Emmy Awards, right? Tell me about the first one and just kind of like, let's go from there.
You know what's funny? I don't remember the first one. It was with the San Francisco Giants. So when I went there, it was to do a documentary style TV show along the lines of like Hard Knocks. Like that was our goal. And so that's what we would win for, were these shows. And like at the time the Giants were winning World Series championships, and so the content we were getting was phenomenal. And then we ended up taking the same formula to the Warriors. And so all those awards are from working with those sports teams. I remember more vividly not winning for when I worked at the Raiders, and we would submit content and we would go to the show. And I remember the first time I went, I had like this nice suit on, and I think we were nominated like for 3 or 4, and we didn't win any of them. And I vividly remember being angry. I remember that more vividly than I don't even remember the first one we won. I really don't. But I remember not winning.
Yeah, and that probably gave you some like motivation too, you know, like being like, what's going on? Like we thought we were gonna win.
One of the issues early on in my career was I thought I was better than I was, if that makes sense. I was a little egotistical in that sense, and I felt that we deserved to win. And so when we didn't win, it hurt that much more. I don't know if it motivated me as much. And now, like in the moment, I was like, all I wanted to do was win one. And now that I have 10 of them, like they don't mean that much to me. I used to keep them in boxes in the garage. And my wife made me get like a display case and put them out. But they don't. It's weird that I wanted it so badly, and now that I have them, they really don't mean that much at all.
Isn't that how most things work too? Like it's funny. Yeah. It's like things that you want the most, and the moment you have them, it's like, I mean, yeah, sure,
yeah. But it's weird too, because it's somewhat one of the reasons that we even submit for them, especially when we're working for the sports teams, is because it makes our department look good to the organization. Like that's important. Absolutely. You know what I mean? That was probably the most important thing, because it's all about like, hey, look at what we're doing. Look how successful we are. Can you increase our budget? You know what I mean? And so that, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, in the moment you want it, and then I don't know.
Well, as you said, like you never get complacent, right? Like you win the award. It's kind of like what's next, you know? It's not like you win and that's it, you know, like I won 10 Emmys, like they said, I'm going to call it a day. But I mean, that's a good thing. Definitely just always always pushing yourself.
No one wants to be a one-hit wonder.
No, you know nobody. I mean? All right. Flores Media, he asks, go to cinema lens or cinema camera?
Cinema camera. I shoot mainly on right now the Red Gemini, but I use Canon photography lenses, 24 to 70, 70 to 200, 16 to 35. I like being able to, I like zoom lenses for documentary stuff, because I rarely am in control of what I'm shooting. And I would say one of my strongest suits is editing. So when I shoot, it's always for coverage. And so it's like, okay, wides, tights, mediums, pans, tilts. And so being able to zoom allows me to change up the shot very, very quickly. I don't have time to change prime lenses. Now a cinema zoom lens would be
30 to 300, 2.8.
So that's what we use at the games. But it's a $50,000 lens. It's worth more than the camera, and it weighs a shit ton. So it's not ideal for run and gun. You know what I mean? I have used like the Fujinon zoom lenses, which are really nice, but man, I mean the Canon. I will go prime on interviews. I'll usually go like 50 millimeter prime on interviews. I actually just ordered Man, there's a, I wish I could remember the name of the company. They're actually based out of Ukraine, and they rehouse old Soviet lenses into cine
Mm.
lenses. Pretty reasonably
I
priced.
Yeah, one of my buddies was telling me about it. I don't know if it's the same company, but he bought a bunch of like Russian like vintage lenses. They look super cool and like that kind of
Uh,
like vintage look.
I was gonna see if I could find it really quick, but they're really cool because they shut down a little bit because of the war, um, but they're back up and running. And yeah, they find these old lenses and they rehouse them. And so I bought one, and it's going to be a while before I get it because they're way behind. But I bought it primarily for interviews. And so interviews is the only situation where I really get to control
Hmm.
anything. But run and gun documentary, yeah, I think photography lenses on a cinema camera, or I think it
Fine.
looks good. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, but it's like the cost of good cinema glass is astronomical. So if you're going to use them, rent them. Um, but it's just not always ideal, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been on for an hour already. I have two more questions for you, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. We can,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So I wanted to talk about your approach whenever you do uh, bigger, bigger projects like the CrossFit Games, right? How do you
Yeah.
approach the week? Because it's a long week for you, obviously, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of planning involved, and also preparing for like the whole post production part of it. How do you approach that week in both like mentally and also just getting ready overall as a filmmaker?
Um. Well, yeah, it's a really long days. It's a long week, and we're usually pretty dusted by the end of it. But we just plan things out as much as we can going into the games. And so, like as of right now, we're working on the interview room, reaching out to athletes, setting up interviews, like pre-interviews, and then there's certain things that we're going to cover. Like when the athletes check in, we'll set up. Like on off days or like in the morning, like a walk from the hotel to the venue with the athletes that we decide to cover. And then the events themselves. So like I'll be shooting on what we call like the slash cam. So it's that 30 to 300. Um, and the way I approach like shooting an event is initially based on the time domain of the event, I will try to get shots of every single athlete, and then as the event moves forward and clear leaders start to materialize, then you start to focus on who's in the lead. But I always start with like get as much coverage as I can of the event,
Hmm.
and then try to capture the story of the event, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing there's a lot of communication within the team, because as you mentioned, like the competition goes on, right? So you
Yeah.
could be trying to focus on Tia, but I don't know, this year, who knows, like Mal O'Brien starts like winning or something, and then you have to pretty much just change the direction you're going for. You're like, oh, we wanted to really focus on Tia, but now we have somebody like Mal O'Brien that's about to win, so
Yeah. I mean,
that.
we have so many cameras that the coverage is rarely an issue. But it will be more so like we will have BTS shooters in the tunnel with the athletes, one on the men's side and one on the women's side, and they're the ones who will be like, oh, what happened there? Or like, hey, what's going on? Or how you feeling? Or like, and that's where you get kind of that, the insight into what, that's the place where like
Yeah.
fans are not allowed to be. So we get a lot of good stuff there. And everyone that we use, one of the issues with CrossFit is the media people that we use, you have to understand the sport. You have to know the stories. You have to know
Mm,
with the athletes, and you have to be able to watch an event and understand what happened and then adjust accordingly. So
absolutely.
we usually meet before an event and we say like, hey, like let's like definitely try to focus on these people, but there's a constant like adjusting as the week goes
Adjusted.
on
Yep.
for sure. And then like so like last year was crazy with the COVID stuff. I remember a check-in. Um, I saw Cooper Marsh, who is I don't know,
He's the agent.
manager, yeah, for quite a few athletes. But we had shot with the Underdog crew that year, and he was on his phone and he was pacing. I could tell something was wrong, and so I went up to him. I said, "Hey, man, like, what's going on?" And he goes, "Bethany just failed a COVID test," and I was like, "Oh shit!" I was like, "This is going to be
Right.
huge story wise." And so if he hadn't told me, we would have found out later. We would have found out
Mm.
probably when everyone else found out. But we were able to start covering it. And so we got, like you'll see in the documentary, like we had a camera at the COVID testing thing when
I remember.
Carrie Pierce starts getting tested, and then she fails, and then Danielle's there and she never failed. But it was like we were able to be on top of that. But that was a huge pivot because that wasn't something we anticipated.
Yeah.
Same thing with like what happened with Brooke Wells, and that's a big part of the documentary too. That's something that's unexpected, where you're like, okay, we have to adjust to what's happening here.
Absolutely. It's such
yeah.
a weird year. I remember
Yeah.
so I was shooting with Mayhem, so that day they tell me, "Hey, you're gonna follow them all the way to the testing center, and you're just gonna, kind of like capture what's going on." And I remember Rich and Chase going there on their bikes, and they felt fine, obviously, like they were just healthy, but they were still nervous. And
Yeah.
right before because Chase went first, Rich tells him, "Chase, this is the first workout. Kind of like this is the first challenge of the week, like we
Yeah.
gotta pass this." And there was, as you said, like there was a camera person there, one of the documentary crew members, just kind of like capturing everything. I remember it's such a weird year, and that was after we already knew that Bethany and Carrie. No, well, Bethany. I don't know if Carrie at that point was already announced, but we knew about Bethany, so people were pretty scared that what if more athletes
Yeah.
starts happening, and then as obviously like you were with the Underdogs crew, so once one person tests positive, then everybody else that was around that person, they gotta test them every day, and they gotta keep like different, like it's a different system for them. So
Yeah.
dude, yeah, pretty weird year. And the
Yeah.
last question I have for you: in your whole filmmaking career, out of 17 years, what are the top 3 best moments that you can think of? And when I'm saying best, it can be the 3 moments that you remember the most, or the 3 moments that gave you like the most like satisfaction out of your career.
Um, I think documenting two championships with the Giants and one with the Warriors is pretty special, because it's just such a rare thing to. It's like right place, right time. The Giants hadn't won one in 53 years, and the Warriors hadn't won one in 40 years, and so getting to be a part of that was really special. I had gosh, I don't know. I mean, when I worked with the San Francisco Giants, we spent a day with Metallica. Um, One of the players, Barry Zito, who's musically inclined, went to their studio and spent the day with them and like jammed, and so we went and documented it, and it was unbelievable to be so close to them, and like be standing right there while they were playing, like
That's very cool.
Enter Sandman or something, and like walking, like interviewing all of them, walking around with James Hetfield, and I was asking him like what it's like to work with Rick Rubin, who had produced their album at the time, who's like a famous music producer, and it was just like, and I got a picture with them, and he signed James Hetfield signed a guitar pick for me, and so that was really really special. And then probably I'll tell this story. It's a cool story for when I worked with the Raiders. When I worked for the Raiders, Al Davis was still alive, and he was still running the team. And one day, it was like a Friday, and everyone had left. It was like 2:00, and I was the only one there. And I was just waiting to leave as well. And one day his secretary called and she said, "Hey, Mr. Davis is coming to the studio. He wants to shoot something." And I'm by myself. And everything I had heard about him was like, don't piss him off. Basically avoid him, because if he's in a bad mood, like he'll take it out on you. There was very much a culture of fear there. And so I was really nervous that I was the only one there, and he was coming and I had to facilitate the shoot. And so he comes in, he sits down, and he wanted to shoot something for a funeral that he couldn't go to. So he sits down, we're turn on the lights, getting the camera set up. And he says, "Make sure you get my rings in the shot," like he's wearing his Super Bowl rings. And so I go wider on the shot, because his hands are on the chair, and it didn't look very good. It was too wide, didn't look good. And so in my mind, I say, do I tell him it doesn't look good, or do I just do what he told me to do? And so I decided to tell him, I said, "Mr. Davis, to get your rings in the shot, I have to go really wide. I don't think it looks very good." And he goes, "You're the boss." And I was like, wow. I was like, that's huge relief. So now I'm feeling pretty comfortable. He was wearing this bracelet, and it has like this gold bracelet, the black oval, and on it says Al and diamonds. And I remember thinking like, wow, that's a really nice looking bracelet. And so I told him, I said, "Mr. Davis, I really like your bracelet." And he goes, "Oh, you like that, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Jimmy the Greek gave me this bracelet." And he could tell that at the time I didn't know who Jimmy the Greek was. And Jimmy the Greek was it was essentially like the guy who made gambling on sports a mainstream thing in Vegas, and had alleged mafia Vegas connections. And so he could tell I didn't know who he was. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." And he goes, "You don't know who that is, do you?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, this was Al Capone's bracelet." And I was like, "Oh." And I was like, is he fucking with me right now? And he was dead serious. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Wow." And he goes, "You know what they're going to say about this bracelet one day?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "They're going to say this was Al Davis's bracelet." And I was like, "Oh,
Nice.
Okay." So it was this wild, it's one of my favorite stories ever, but that moment, like I've never forgotten it. And like, he's I don't know if you're familiar with his story. There's some great documentaries on it. But like what he did and accomplished in the NFL and everything is pretty amazing. So to have that interaction with him is pretty special for me. Yeah.
That's dope. And in the CrossFit world, one moment that you remember that stands out the most?
Gosh, there's so many good ones. I'd have to go with something pretty recent. I mean, there's some really, really great ones, but last year, I went and shot with Emma Carey in her hometown. She was 16 at the time. And this was during quarterfinals last year. And her town is like very small. There's one hotel, there's no Starbucks. And I don't know if I've ever had a better, more enjoyable experience based on just working with her and her parents and how genuinely nice they were. And they were like, "Oh," like her mom would make me overnight oats to take back to my hotel for breakfast in the morning. And it was really special to me because I was the first person to tell her story. Yeah. No one had shot with her yet. No one really, she was just coming onto the scene in terms of people knowing who she was. And it was just a really, really special experience where and that's the interesting about CrossFit is rarely do I go to these things, because I always try to maintain a very professional relationship with athletes, right? I don't want it to be this "Oh, we're best friends," "Oh, we're best friends, we're going to hang out outside of this." And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But I feel like we really like bonded and connected. Yeah, and I saw her when I was out at Naples this year, and her mom was there, and like we hugged and we talked, and that was really hard because she had just pulled out of the season because of her back injury, and it was kind of emotional for me because I felt how she was feeling. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah, absolutely.
so yeah, I mean, I have a lot of really good experiences, but most recently that one stands out for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Torin, 1 hour, 15 minutes. I know I said 1 hour, so I really appreciate the extra 15 minutes. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully, I mean, we can do a part 2 anytime. Like,
oh yeah,
there is still things that we can talk about. But yeah, I'm super excited to see the new content that's gonna be put out, and obviously the stuff that you guys are gonna be doing for the games this year.
Yeah, and we have a couple episodes of Miles to Madison coming out in July, like leading up to the games, and then we'll have 4 that come out shortly after the games too. So I know the 2022 documentary will probably have to wait a while, but those ones should give people a little bit of content.
Absolutely. Where can people find you? I mean, your Instagram's right there at Torin Simpson.
Yeah, that's it. Really, that's all I really use. I'm not on the Twitter or TikTok or any of that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And before we go, what's next for Torin Simpson?
What's next? I am going to be opening up one of the Miles to Madison projects and making some tweaks to it. It is episode, episode 6. And so it's a mix of Team Reykjavik and Mayhem during quarterfinals. And it's a pretty good episode. Yeah. So
great. Excited to watch it. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. I'm going to post this on Spotify probably today, but yeah, it's going to be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and obviously YouTube if you're watching right now. Torin, I really appreciate your time. I'll probably see you at the games very soon. So I'm excited to do so. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Torin, anything else you want to add before we cut it?
Nope. All good.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.